Hey, good morning, everyone. Tuesday morning, that is. I'm gonna be quick. It's like I just want to sit there and break some things down and just give like basic description information about what I'm about to talk about. And here's another thing. A lot of people in general, like, for example, when it comes to Christianity, a lot of Christians believe in different things, even though a lot of Christians at the same time read the same Bible. And in my personal preference or opinion, I feel like that's a problem, because if it reads the same way, even though people are going to get different understandings / revelations, interpretations, if people do like kids going to school or adults going to college, high school, whatever, and read the Bible, but also get a dictionary, look up words, even look up concordances that break down what the verse is saying, what it means, then it may take time, but the point is, over time, things are going to fall in place and make sense and going to fall in line with each other. Now, I looked up a video this morning on YouTube, and I just wanted to I looked it up, well, not the same video before, but I did information on this before, but I wrote it down on paper so I can break it down here in this video, and it's real crystal clear. But the reason, like, this is another thing I forgot to say. When it comes to people who believe in Judaism / dealing with the Jews and things of that nature, the fact, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, some Jews believe that Jesus is the Messiah and he already came and he's coming back again, while others don't. And what I'm trying to say here is this. Like, that's fine. I'm not really dealing with if they believe in it or not. But what I'm saying is that the same God who dealt with Moses, Abraham, Noah, Amos, David, Nahum, I think I just said David, Nehemiah, Amos, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Malachi, all these other Old Testament characters and prophets, is the same God of the New Testament. A lot of people don't agree with that or believe that or misunderstand it a certain way. But in the Old Testament, God saved / rescued his people in tons of different ways. One of the main stories in the Old Testament, coming from the book of Exodus, is when the Lord led Moses and the Israelites across the Red Sea. And if I'm correct, that is God rescuing / saving and delivering his people. So, and the key thing is this: it's different ways of breaking down words. Like, it's a different way that God can save, rescue, and deliver his people. In the New Testament, well, let me say this real quick. The Old Testament, people had to do things by sacrifice. The New Testament, sacrifice, well, it depends on how people break it down. But I'm saying that God came and straightened things out in the New Testament, the new covenant that we deal with and live in those days today. So it wouldn't make sense to keep on sacrificing lambs and sheep and all these other type of animals, because those days are over with. That's the Old Testament. That's between Malachi and leading up to the book of Matthew, which starts the new covenant, New Testament. And the point is that a lot of people think that we have to do things dealing with the Old Testament, but knowing that the Lord came and straightened things out for himself, and he did it not in a spiritual way like the Old Testament, but God, who is a spirit, came or impregnated, he got involved with the Virgin Mary and came in the likeness of sinful flesh, and his spirit was put inside of a fleshly body. And then knowing that he became, well, I'm not going to say became human, because once again, he still was a spirit and still is. But knowing that the Spirit of God was starting or going to live a life similar to me and other people, being human, but he still was going to be a spirit at the same time. And some people may not understand that. That's where people get lost and confused. But my whole point here is this, that The way that God in the New Testament saved people was the same way as the Old Testament. He sat there and healed people. He sat there and fed people. He, like the woman with the issue of blood, the man with the I think his arm or wrist or something was crooked. The time he sat there and spit on the ground, touched the clay, and he sat there and touched the man's eyes and said, go to the sea and wash off your face, rinse it off with water. Is the same God of the Old Testament. Some people don't understand that, but how can you say or believe that there's one God, but not realize that the same God of the Old Testament is the same God who came in the likeness of sinful flesh in the New Testament? Like I said, the Spirit of God, there's no limit to God. So if people say that I agree with that, how is it hard to understand that God decided that he was going to put his spirit inside of a body that was different than everybody else's? Because the body of Jesus never did sin. He died for man's sins that we could get back on track with God. So God put himself, his spirit, inside of a body that never did sin, but he died on the cross for man's sins. And then he went to hell and preached to the captives and saved the people and got the keys from the devil to heaven. But all I'm trying to say is this, and I'm done. I didn't mean to talk this long already, but I looked up a video early on YouTube dealing with the name, the Hebrew name, Yahshua, Y-E-S-H-U-A. It's Hebrew. Y-A is abbreviated for Yahweh, Israel's God, and it comes from the scripture Exodus 3 verse 14. Then when it comes to the Hebrew word again, or name Yahshua, the Aramaic part of Yahshua is the last 5 letters, Y-A-S-H-A. It's a verb that means to save, deliver, or rescue. But if you put those together, Y-A, which is spelled Y-E, then Y-A-S-H-A, which is spelled S-H-U-A, it comes out to, like I said, Yahshua, which is the Hebrew name for God, meaning God is going to save, rescue, deliver his people. So I looked at the video, it said Yahshua equals Joshua in English, like the book of Joshua. He was a prophet in the Old Testament. I forgot about him. Joshua is the English translation of the Hebrew name Yahshua. So then when you go to the Greek translation of Joshua, that turns into I-E-S-O-U-S. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm just spelling it. So then lastly, when you get to Yahshua, the Greek translation, I-E-S-O-U-S, equals Jesus in English. And then when you get to the name Jesus, that is the English translation of the Hebrew name Yahshua, dealing with the Old Testament. And this is my last point, and I'm gonna be done. Yahshua, I'm meant to say, the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. That's what those people often confuses people. You don't see the name Jesus in the Old Testament because the Old Testament is written in Hebrew, while the New Testament is written in Greek. That's why you see Jesus in the New Testament, which is the Greek well, actually, I meant to say too, the New Testament is written in Greek, but the Greek version is I-E-S-O-U-S, and they translate it to English that we know as Jesus. But the whole point that I'm saying is that God's name in Hebrew is Yahshua, and Yahshua is the same as Jesus. The only difference is Jesus is the English way of saying his name, while Yahshua is the Hebrew version. So my whole point is Yahweh, well, I meant to say Yahshua and Jesus are the same God. They're the same person. I advise people to do their research and look up words and see what this word or name means in English, what it means in Greek, what it means in Hebrew, because people will continue to get confused if they don't do their own personal research. Some people are going to be thinking what I used to think, that Jesus is different than God. And there's only one God. He goes by so many different names and titles in the Bible. That's what throws people off. But, and this is the point. What sense would it make knowing that God is sovereign, supreme, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, and all these other things? What sense would it make for him to get somebody else's help to do things that he can do for himself? That doesn't make any sense. So the whole point that I'm making is that at the end of the day, that's why we need to do what Paul says, study to show ourselves approved unto God, a workman not be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. All I'm saying here, and I'm done, is that Jesus is Yahweh. Yahweh is Jesus. Yahshua is Jesus. Jehovah is Jesus. All these different names tied to the one God. The same God who healed people in the Old Testament and rescued and delivered is the same God in the New Testament today, because there's only one God. And I forgot to say this, but the reason why the Bible goes by different titles like Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is because the Old Testament, while God, like now, sitting on the throne, was reigning, in the Old Testament, he was always a spirit. Like when he did things like dealing with Daniel in the lion's den and the 3 Hebrew boys that got thrown in a fiery furnace and all these other things, dealing with Moses when he went up on Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments, and Dave and other stuff. The whole purpose and point is that God always was a spirit, and he still is a spirit. The thing that some people get confused about and think that Jesus is different than God is because the New Testament starts to mention the name Jesus. But like I said, the New Testament is Greek and the Old Testament is Hebrew. And the other point about it is this, that the New Testament, in order for man's sins to be forgiven and to be dealt with, you had to have a sacrifice to die for man's sins. Animals' sacrifices weren't going to be dealt with or accepted anymore. So God, being the only perfect person who's perfect, he put himself, his spirit, inside of Mary, and then eventually over time, after 9 months or so, the baby was born, and his name was Jesus, which means, once again, that God is going to save, deliver, or heal his people. So Jesus, that name means God is going to save, deliver, rescue. And the body of Jesus included, or inside of it, was the Spirit of God. That same spirit that was with Moses and everybody else. And that's all I'm trying to say. A lot of people don't understand it, and it's not really hard. And I'm not accepting people to get it overnight. I'm just saying that look up different words like Yahshua. Look up words like Jehovah. Look up words like Yahweh. Look up Jesus. Look up all these different words and also titles and see what they mean. And also see what these different names mean in different languages like Hebrew, Greek, English, Latin, Aramaic. It's going to help you understand things that seem really hard and complicated. But the whole point is, when you realize what they mean, they're all going to point to the one God of the Old Testament. And that same God is the God of the New Testament. That's all I'm trying to say. But anyway, to God be the glory. May God bless you. May you have a great and prosperous day. God bless you and your family, truly.